You climbed the ladder, you earned the title, but something still feels off? What if success without happiness isn't success at all? Sharissa Sebastian Deppen has coached leaders at Google, Microsoft, and CNN, and she says most of us are doing it backwards. This episode reveals what nobody tells high achievers until they burn out. If you feel stuck at the top, this one is for you. Most leaders chase success, but why do so many still feel stressed, stuck, and unfulfilled?
We all want to feel valued. We want to feel like we're making an impact. When I started working with my coaches, they really helped me to unpack this. They really helped me to find out, like, who am I?
What's really going on with leadership and happiness in today's workplace?
We all look for that deep sense of purpose, and we all want to feel like other people see us and they appreciate us and value us, and we want to make a difference in the world. We spend over 90,000 hours of our lives at work.
Redefine success, reclaim joy. Watch the full conversation now. Most leaders chase success, but why do so many still feel stressed, stuck, and unfulfilled? Today, we're diving into the science of happiness at work and why most leaders get it wrong. We all want fulfilling careers, but why do so many professionals, even at the top, feel stressed, stuck, and unfulfilled? Today's guest, Sharissa Sebastian Deppen, has dedicated her career to solving this problem. As a TEDx speaker with one of the top 2% most watched talks, a Forbes Coaches Council contributor, and a LinkedIn learning instructor, she's helped executives from Google, Microsoft, and even CNN create successful and sustainable careers. Today, she's sharing the secrets to happiness in leadership and why most companies get it all wrong. All right, Sharissa, I have to start with this. Leaders at top companies like Google, Microsoft, and Amazon, they seem to have it all: the title, the salary, the influence. But behind the scenes, you're seeing something different. What's really going on with leadership and happiness in today's workplace?
Oh, that's a great question. That's a big one. So there's so many different elements to this, but I'll try to kind of summarize that. So of course we're all human, right? So whether you're a CEO or an executive at one of those big companies, or whether you have a completely different career track or you're doing something completely different, the fascinating thing that I've learned over the years of coaching is that at a very fundamental human level, we have some very basic needs as humans, and even from a psychological perspective, we all want to feel valued. We want to feel like we're making an impact in the world, we're doing meaningful work, and that what we do matters, and we want to continue to add value and help others and support others and feel that sense of fulfillment and peace in our career, right? No one wants to be stressed, and no one looks for that next step in their career thinking, oh, well, this is going to add more stress, so yay, let's just go for that, right? It's not that kind of thing. And we all look for that deep sense of purpose, and we all want to feel like other people see us and they appreciate us and value us, and we want to make a difference in the world. So I think underneath, like fundamentally, we all have this desire, and some people, we fulfill it in different ways. So we have different ideas or different perceptions of what that means to us and how we go about fulfilling that need. And of course, we don't consciously walk around saying, oh, how do we feel valued and, supported in the world? But underlying that, that's a lot of what drives our decisions in terms of our career.
So what are some common challenges they face, though, when it comes to workplace happiness?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different things. One is misalignment with the type of work that they're doing. And so a lot of what I see, or what I've seen over the years, is that when people, and it all depends on the why, right? So why they're in that position in the first place. And there's so many different reasons for this. Like, that's the very first question I always ask my clients whenever they tell me, okay, this is what I'm aspiring to, this is what I would want as my next step. I always try to get to the root of why. What is the deeper meaning? What is driving you? What is that really strong why and purpose behind why that, where you're going is so important. Not everybody knows that. And I can tell you, even from my own experience, sadly, there were a lot of, I just kind of fell into my next role as I went along, and I couldn't even answer that question. I couldn't answer the question of, like, why is that next step so important to you? What is it that you're looking for? And so I think it really comes from understanding why you're there and aligning with something that is really, that makes you feel like, okay, I'm actually doing something that is purposeful and meaningful to me personally, right? So if you feel like the work that you're doing and your day in and day out is not really aligned, you feel like, okay, I can see that I'm making progress at work, but am I really working towards something that's bigger than me? I don't know. I don't really feel that connection. Then you're really going to struggle with that. That's where that stress is going to come from, because there's a misalignment between your values, what you believe about, in as far as what's important to you, and the work that you're doing. Because we spend over 90,000 hours of our lives at work, and so of course that's going to impact how you feel, right? Because you're spending so much time in your career, and so that's going to impact not just how you're showing up at work, your stress levels, how you're feeling as you go through your day, but it also has a ripple effect on your life outside of work and all your relationships and all of those kinds of things. So it's so important to align that. So that's one of the first things that came to mind when you asked about that. That's one thing. And then it's also just on a practical level, seeing where we spend our time. Because a lot of time we're at the effect of our calendar, we're at the effect of everyone else's priorities. So just getting really clear and being able to take a step back from your everyday and ask yourself the question, are my priorities, is my time aligning with my priorities and the things that are important to me? So it's at 80-20, right? Am I putting my time and my focus in the areas that are going to give me 80% of the results that I'm looking for? Or am I just kind of going with the flow and just going day to day and feeling like I'm in a hamster wheel? Because of course that's going to increase your stress and unhappiness and all of those kinds of things. So yeah, those are the two big things I would say.
90,000 hours. That's a lot of hours. I just did the calculation. That's 11,250 8-hour days. That's a lot. That's a lot of time devoted to work. But I mean, when you think about it, the way life is like perfectly designed, right? There's 24 hours in a day. You're supposed to sleep for 8. You're supposed to work for 8. That only leaves 8 for everything else. And that includes eating, spending times with friends, learning, so that's kind of an interesting number. I had never really thought about that. So, you did a TEDx talk, and in it, you discussed the pursuit of happiness in the workplace. Yeah. What inspired you to focus on that topic?
Oh, that is so interesting. I think most of that inspiration came from my own struggle, because I felt like, I was just kind of going through the motions in my career for so many years and just taking that next step that happened to come my way without being intentional about where I was going and what I was doing. And so I kind of started to hit a wall towards the end of my corporate career. So my background is in technology, and I spent many, many years in that tech space. I started off as a software engineer and then moved into technology leadership. But towards the end of that career, I started to get just stretched way too thin. I was under a lot of stress, and the work wasn't really aligned like I was talking about before. I really didn't feel that passion that I felt maybe earlier on in my career. I love the innovation part of my career. I loved leading my teams. I love that that personal connections and all of those kinds of things. But at the same time, there was just a lot that wasn't working. And so when I started to head towards burnout, that's when I really started to take a step back and question. And I really had to kind of get to the end of myself. And my journey, I always say, is very much a faith-based journey. So I'm a Christian, and I was trying to figure this out on my own, and I was like struggling with that. And I finally had to say, okay, I know there's something bigger and better out there that I have no idea about. And I feel like when I did that, I started, like, all these other opportunities started to open up. That's when I was introduced to coaching. I had no idea what coaching was. And then when I started working with my coaches, they really helped me to unpack this. They really helped me to find out, like, who am I? Like, what are the strengths that I bring to the table? How does all of that, so my strengths, my experience, what I'm passionate about, how does all of that connect to help me figure out what is going to be meaningful work to me personally, and what is my purpose? What is it that I feel like I'm being called to do? And so through that is how I got into coaching. And so it was from that place of struggle and trying to figure out, okay, how do I find joy in my everyday? If I'm going to be spending that many hours at work, there's got to be a way, right, for it to be more fulfilling and just to be more joyful at work. And I couldn't answer that question until later on, when I started to do a lot of research on this topic. And that's when I, discovered all of these, the things that I share on that TED Talk. And so that is really what brought me to this part. And so it's fascinating to me how a lot of times in our struggle is where we learn the things that we need to be able to then turn around and help other people out. And it becomes so purposeful and meaningful to us in that way.
No, it's just, that's funny that you say that, because I actually just about a month ago, I released a book about my decentralized A-team method coaching system. And as we were chatting before we jumped on here, I was working 105 hours a week. It's what ended up creating the program. Was that just wasn't sustainable really isn't sustainable for any human being, but especially, a father with a wife and 4 kids. It's not sustainable. And so you're right. I think a lot of what we do as leaders comes from, the experiences that we have. so I wonder, like, so you created a LinkedIn learning course. I see it's about happiness at work. So what are some key takeaways though that for leaders trying to build a more fulfilling career? Because like we said, a lot of this stuff is based off of your experiences, but it can't all be, because otherwise you're not going to develop a fulfilling career. So what are some takeaways for them for that?
Yeah. So I would say, first of all, and I'm going to kind of expand on what I was just saying earlier, it has to start with knowing yourself and knowing yourself really well. Like, who do you believe you are, right? Like at the very core, what is your identity and how are you functioning from that place? Because a lot of clarity, a lot of confidence and all of that can come when you have clarity on who you are, what you bring to the table, what is your, for lack of a better term, like your unique value proposition, right? Like the value that you bring, what makes you unique so that you stand out as a leader, because everyone is different. Everyone has a different, they show up differently as a leader, even though they might be similar in terms of their leadership style and approach. But it's based on our belief systems. It's based on our experience, and a variety of different things. But until you know your own strengths as a leader and what's important to you and how you want to lead, and how it also ties into that professional branding. I speak a lot about this. We do this a lot in my coaching practice. A lot about like the professional brand. What is your identity as a leader? How do you lean into those strengths? And then from that place, how do you connect with others to really be that, to provide that level of support that your team needs, that the business needs, because so much more opens up from there once you're really clear. And I call that your leadership zone of genius. So once you have, a good grasp of what that is, then it's so much easier to embrace who you are and the unique, qualities that you have, and then be able to step into that leadership from that place of confidence, knowing like, okay, now I got it. I know who I am. I know what's important to me. And now I can go out and be the leader that I'm called to be. And then I can, better add value to those around me. So yeah, I would say it starts there.
Yeah, I would actually agree with you on that. I do agree. I pretty much coach that to my clients as well. So a lot of leaders that I talk to, they think that success and happiness are mutually exclusive. Okay. I mean, kind of bends the mind a little bit. What is your take on that?
Oh, that is a very interesting topic. And my first thought when you said that was, you have to define what success means to you individually. Everyone has their own definition of success. And where I normally go with my clients on this one is I ask the question, first of all, what does success look like in various different areas of their career or in their life? But also, why is that so important to you, right? If you're moving towards something, if success looks a certain way to you, let's get to the bottom of like why that's important. And is that aligned with, with like who you are and what's really important to you as far as purpose and impact and all of that kind of stuff, and where you can add value. And so I think going back to that and defining for yourself, where is your success coming from? Because I can tell you my idea of what success was for me back when I was in that career was completely misaligned. Like I thought success should look a certain way, but when I was achieving that success, I was not happy. I was like, wait, I got here. I thought this was it, right? Like this is the thing that is supposed to fulfill me. But that's not how that works. And so getting to the core of what does it mean to be successful, and really defining that for yourself, and working with a coach, working with somebody that can walk you through that, I think is also so important, because I can tell you without my coaches, I would probably be, way back still trying to figure this out on my own. And so, yeah, that's a really, really good question. And I would just say, just examine yourself and ask yourself, if you are defining, whatever your definition of success is, how is that aligning with the decisions that you make, where you're placing yourself in terms of your career and all of that? And how is that impacting how you feel on a day-to-day basis? Is that really giving you that joy and fulfillment and purpose that you're looking for? Or is that completely, is it just misaligned? Because for me, that success and happiness were definitely not aligned at all, because I thought I had success, but then the happiness was just not there. There was no joy or fulfillment to the level that I thought I expected basically at that point.
Yeah, I'm a big believer that I think, you have to have that, like your little council of people that you speak to about, issues, because I mean, it could be a coach, it could be a therapist, even, it could be
Absolutely.
your significant other, because they see things a little differently than we do. And so they might think of things we don't think of and remind you to think of that. And especially when it comes to defining success. I mean, when you said that about, you started off by saying, first you have to define what success means to you. I was on a podcast hosted by a gentleman named Brian Kelly. He's since become a pretty good friend. But one of the things he used to ask every guest, and he's now writing a book about this, is how do you define success? because he realized that success is defined completely differently to every single person. It really is.
Right.
And that's why I actually completely agree with you. I think, like, how can you say success and happiness are mutually exclusive unless you've defined what success is? And then if you've defined what success is, I don't see how you can't include happiness in that. I think, in fact, I actually think you would have to include happiness in that, in my opinion, or you're not successful. That'd be my definition. I feel like I have to get my definition of success is, accomplishing what I'm setting out to accomplish while enjoying doing it. So that kind of puts happiness into the mix. So with that said, how does company culture impact a leader's ability to find happiness in their role?
Oh, this is a big one. Yeah, it absolutely does. Because again, going back to the number of hours and the amount of time we spent at work, spend at work in our lifetime, it absolutely is going to have an influence, because that is the environment that you're in day in and day out. So it's going to impact you. And I love what you said about like the people that you surround yourself with. They are absolutely going to have an influence on you. And I believe it's Jim Rohn that said that you are you're the combination or the average of the 5 people you spend the most amount of time with, right? So being really intentional. And of course, it's harder in the workplace because you can't always choose the team that you're working with or the people that you work with in your work environment. But it absolutely does play a part. Now, there's 2 different ways to look at this. There's things that are within your control in that work environment, and then there's things that are out of your control, right? So as a leader, there's going to be things that are maybe a little bit more in your control in terms of how you set up your leadership and how you approach leading your team and different things like that. And you also have a part to play in creating that culture. There's certain things that maybe as a leader you can set and you can define as far as like, this is the type of culture that I want to create in my sphere of influence, right? And then there's going to be things outside of your sphere of influence. And so it's going to be up to you to decide, okay, does my work environment allow me to do what I need to do and align with the things that I'm passionate about, and am I able to do my job to the best of my ability given my environment? And if something is off there, I mean, again, we always have choices, right? As far as like what we do, we can try to see if there's things that we can do and conversations that we can have to influence how that culture and the all of that is basically for ourselves. And of course, you're advocating for your team as well, right? So you can start to see if you can influence that in some way. But also you have a choice to say, okay, they might just not be whatever you do. If it doesn't work, then it might be time to really evaluate, am I in the right place? If it's really causing you a lot of stress, and if it's not causing you to be able to function at your highest level, then it could be, if you've done everything you could do and nothing is changing, then obviously there's a lot that's outside of your control. So it might be time to really ask the hard question, right? Am I in the right place in order for me to really thrive? And that, of course, ties into happiness, right? Because if you feel like you're stifled and you're not able to thrive and be that leader that you're meant to be in that environment, then there might be something off with that environment. But again, it's really important to have that support team around you, so that people can ask the right questions to help you get that different perspectives on, because it's very hard for us to figure this out on our own, and we're not meant to. We're meant for community. We have people around us that can support us, and so getting the right support system in place for you to help you evaluate that can be really helpful as well.
So what are the biggest myths about happiness at work that you've encountered in your career?
Oh, okay. So the word that comes up for me as soon as you said that was achievement. And I love that you brought this up in terms of success too. So a lot of times people equate success with achievement. So in other words, when I get that promotion, or when I have a team of this size, or when I have I'm able to impact the business in this way, or I get that, whatever it is, title, position, all the things, right? Or salary increase. It could be a number of different things, but they equate that with success, and then also with happiness. Like, oh, when I get there, I call that in the TED Talk, I talk about this as well, right? So like that it will get better when syndrome, like, oh, you're constantly chasing, right? The next thing, you're never like content where you are. And that's another big part of happiness, is even though, yes, you might have goals and all of those kinds of things, but learning to be content and grateful in the moment is so important to your happiness. But that's a little bit of a sidebar. But coming back to what you were asking, I think that is really important. Like, just achievement tends to be one of those things that can trip people up a little bit, because they're so focused on achieving, thinking that when they achieve, they'll be happy, or whatever it is that they're looking for as like an offshoot of that. But that doesn't always happen. And the problem with that is you get into this never-ending cycle. You keep achieving and getting more and more things, but at the same time it doesn't really equate to that happiness. So that could be definitely a trap when it comes to trying to get that fulfillment out of work.
Yeah, you made me think back to when I worked for a restaurant delivery service for many years as their CTO, and I reported directly to the CEO. And we ran everything using agile development. So we'd have sprint periods of, maybe 3 weeks, if I remember correctly. And I would give assignments to the teams, and these were the things that, were important to get done. And let's just assume that during that 3-week period, we didn't have any major bugs come up. There were no fires to put out. They were just working on their sprint. Well, if that sprint was ending on Friday and my employee he was leaving Wednesday and said, "Hey, I've gotten everything done," I might actually tell them to take Thursday and Friday off. And my CEO would get upset and say, "Why didn't you start them on the next sprint?" Well, I haven't defined it yet. You don't define the next sprint by the rules until the first one's over. And I'd say it's not about how much they accomplish. It's about how happy they are after they accomplish what they accomplish. And they're not going to be very happy if they worked really hard, got a bunch of stuff done early. I'm going to reward them by giving them the day off the next day or two, because I don't really need them here. Why make them come into work and sit at a desk? I mean, I've personally had to do that as a consultant someplace. And he kind of looked at me like, "All right, you're the boss, but it doesn't make much sense to me." And to me, it made a lot of sense, because they would go home, they would recharge, they would come back that Monday, and they're like, "Let's do this next sprint." And they also knew that rather than milking the clock, that if they got things done, Mike's going to give me an extra time off that I can enjoy. I still get paid, and he's not constantly having to crack the whip. And again, it kind of goes back to what I said about hiring people who can do the job. You hired them for a reason. So if they get the job done, why like saddle them with even more work and even more work? Unless, like, I obviously I did put that caveat in there that there were no fires to put out. And, that's part of work, right? So if something comes up, you're going to have to deal with that. But for the most part, it was pretty smooth. And in 5 years, I did not have a single person leave my department. And I believe it's because they were just happy working there.
Exactly. And you just touched on so many things that really are like part of that, those puzzle pieces that contribute to happiness, right? When people feel appreciated, which is exactly what you did for them, then they tend to want to be more engaged, and, they show up and they are happier because they feel like, "Oh, wow, somebody sees me, they value me, they appreciate the work that I'm doing, and they're rewarding me for it." So that makes me more motivated, right, to come to work and to want to do a really good job. And what you said is just proof of that. The fact that you had your team for an extended period of time. I think you said several years.
5 years.
5 years. And I mean, that's incredible to have the same team for five years. And so that is such a perfect example of that. And it's also, the other thing it makes me think about is how important values-based decisions are when it comes to leadership. And for you, it sounds like that was one of, like an important value that drove that decision for you, right? Like, you value the people, your team, and all of that. And you value the fact that they took their work seriously. And so you acted accordingly. You rewarded them because that's something that you value. So as a leader, that's another thing that, I talk about a lot in my coaching business, is basically just aligning with values, because you feel more at peace when you feel like the things that, you can identify, first of all, the things that are important to you as a leader and how you want to function as a leader. And when you start to make decisions that align with that, it just feels good. And you start to see the impact of that, right? You start to see the positive impact. And also, people like to have a certain level of autonomy in their work. And so when they feel like, going back to your points earlier, like getting the right people in the right seats, when they feel like they're trusted to do their job and they're rewarded and recognized for it, they do incredible work, right? Amazing things happen in situations. So.
I mean, I had a situation when I left that position. I went out and became a consultant, and I was working at the Los Angeles Superior Court. And it's important to know that it's a governmental agency for a reason. They had us start our contract on a Friday, but then that Friday plus 2 full more weeks. So you're talking about Friday to Friday to Friday. We did not have a computer. We didn't have anything in our workstation. Yeah. And the leader of the department said, "Just bring in a book and read." Well, we all three felt like we were thieves. We're sitting there. Our average billing rate was $150 an hour. And we're sitting there for 8 hours a day, 3 of us, reading a book. And it was really demotivating. And I noticed something really interesting. One of the 3 of us, this one particular gentleman,
Mhm.
He called in sick a lot during those 2 weeks, but never again once the project got started. And it's
Interesting.
just that I think he didn't like just sitting there doing nothing.
Yeah.
And like the rest of us, we felt like we were stealing from them. And so he just decided, I'm just not going to come in. It was an interesting thing. So I like to always ask some, to kind of land the plane. I like to ask some offbeat questions that you might not expect. So
Okay.
if workplace happiness had a mascot, what would it be and why?
The sun, like sunshine. I promise you, I did not even think about that. That's just the first word that came out of my mouth.
Good. I like it.
Yeah, it's just bright and provides so much warmth and light and energy. So that's what came to mind when you
Yeah,
said that.
that actually works. I think that works
Mhm.
perfectly. So if you had to create a happiness at work survival kit, what are
Oh,
3 things that would absolutely have to be in that survival kit?
3 things. Whew, that's a big question. You give me some ideas, Mike, for for actually creating this.
Well,
What would be
I mean,
in this one?
for some people, it might be, a coffee mug,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think probably well-defined values is probably one thing that would have to be there. Because like you
Yeah.
said, as the leader, you're making value-based decisions, or at least you should be. And how can you do that if you haven't defined them, right? Now you've
Yes,
got me answering
absolutely.
the question.
I love it. Well, thank you for giving me a little
That was
extra time
tricky.
on that
So
one.
there you go. So
But
there's
yeah, I do
one. Now
have,
you just need 2 more.
and actually, I'm going to tie something else to that because I think it is really
Okay.
important. With value-based decisions, it's your belief system because that absolutely impacts how you behave at work, what you're thinking. We all have limiting beliefs, we make assumptions, all of those things. So really being able to examine your belief system and what is driving those decisions. And because that has an absolute impact, like a huge impact, right, on how you feel when you go to work. Whatever thoughts and belief systems are kind of driving in your mind are driving you, is going to impact that. So I would say values and beliefs. So examine those and make sure that you're on the right track when it comes to mindset, because mindset is extremely important when it comes to happiness and success and all of those different things. So I would definitely say that for sure. The second thing I would say is your support system. We touched on this today. It's extremely important to surround yourself with the support that you need in order to be that best version of yourself, for sure. And then let's see, the third thing that I would say as far as that happiness checklist is, gratitude is huge when it comes to happiness. I touched on contentment a little bit early on, but just being grateful and present in the moment. You don't want to lose the joy that God gives us in a given day by just focusing so much on what I call the gap of where you are versus where you want to be. So being content, being, just looking for ways to be happy and grateful every single day, because that's going to come out of you, right? So you're going to be known as that person who's like, doesn't get weighed down by the circumstances or anything else, because you're constantly looking for ways to be appreciative of people around you, to be grateful for what you have, grateful for this day that you've been given as a gift. So I would say gratitude is a huge part of happiness as well. There's so many other components, but if I were to
Excellent.
pick 3, I would say those 3.
So, you mentioned belief systems, and it made me think about like society today. And I know as a leader, when I have team members, I try to like, one of the first questions I ask a new person when they come on board is, how do you like to be communicated with? Because some people like email, some people like face to face, some people like phone calls, some people like video, whatever. I'll do what you want, but you got to tell me how you like it. So as belief systems go, part of the problem I believe in society today is that people don't people believe like, I'm allowed to have this opinion because it's my belief, and you can have your opinion because it's your belief, and they follow that for most things. But when it comes to like social issues, political issues, suddenly they don't want to bother to consider what the other person's belief system is. So like, if someone's uber conservative, I know what I can expect from them in certain situations. If they're super progressive, I know what's important to them. And so I know what I can expect in that situation. And it's why you see so many people thinking other people are dumb online. This person's so stupid. They're not stupid. They have a belief system that they adhere
Right.
to. And if you understand that belief system, my guess is if you're paying attention, you can almost predict their answers to questions, right? And we have to learn in the workplace, in my opinion, to understand the belief systems of the people you're working with, and then
Absolutely.
work within those with them. I mean, I'm not saying that you have to believe the same way as they do, but my gosh, if like, okay, a perfect example. I am not like opposed to people using, profanity, but I do not like it at work. I think that at work you should be not necessarily, I don't like to use the word professional because these days it evokes this really weird image, but I think you have to be like sort of language neutral in the workplace.
Mm.
And so I remember one time I used to work as a paralegal and I had this boss that just cussed up a blue streak. And one day I just told him, I said, Bob, it makes me uncomfortable when you do that. And it makes all the girls outside uncomfortable and they hear you. Do you think maybe at work you could keep that to a minimum and then maybe only do that when we go out to lunch or go out to dinner? He changed and he realized that, wow, you're right. This is how I believe, but not everybody believes that way.
Right.
And it changed the work environment tremendously. And I remember thinking back about it like a year afterwards and going, wow, I made one simple comment and it really changed things around here. I mean, the power of that is crazy. So
Yeah, it's
one
incredible.
last question before we land the plane. All right. And I'm really interested to hear what you have to say about this one.
Okay.
Let's say that you get to redesign the modern workday from scratch. So, hey, we'll use President Trump since he seems to be trying to explode everything these days. He comes to you and he says, I want you to redesign the modern workday from scratch. What's the first thing you'd change?
Oh, first of all, my natural instinct is exactly what you were just talking about, leaning in with curiosity and understanding what do people need. So I would go and do the research to say, okay, what are going to work, right? For most people, what are people asking for that's going to really support the way in which they function really well. So it's not like a perfect answer. Like it's not about me and my, what I think is going to be best, because what my preference is going to be completely different to anyone else. So I would definitely do the research and lean in with curiosity and understanding of like, okay, where are people at, and how do I understand what they need, why they need it, so that when we come to, when we get to the place where a decision needs to be made, we're making it from a very informed place, leaning in with curiosity and understanding, and not with our own, preconceived ideas or making assumptions or anything like that. Because like I said before, we have, it's very easy to make assumptions. It's very easy to, come in with these limiting beliefs and just make it, and just kind of go in and make decisions based on that. But, that can lead to a lot of pain if you don't first I really understand your audience, understanding like who your decision is impacting, and knowing what they need, and how do you lead in from that perspective. So I would definitely say that's the way I would go about doing it, rather than just making, just kind of throwing out a couple of things that need to be, that I feel need to be. Yeah.
Makes sense. I mean, I have a friend who's a life coach and she always reminds people that their words have impact.
Yes.
And so like, she's a big believer. And actually, she kind of changed how I word things, because I'm a fairly blunt person, but I don't say that anymore. I don't say that I'm blunt. I say that I just speak openly. And it's because what she said was, when people say they're blunt, it's usually they're using it as an excuse to be rude. Oh, you can't blame me for that. I told you I was blunt. But it's not an excuse to be rude.
Right.
It isn't. And so that's why I changed it to I speak openly, because the difference is, if you come to me with an idea and I don't like it, I'm not going to sugarcoat it and tell you that I like it. I'm going to tell you that I don't like it, but I'm also going to tell you why I don't like it. And then I'm going to look at you and say, so now it's up to you to decide. Do you go back to the drawing board and come back to me with a modified version of the idea after I've given you this feedback? Or have you decided that it's just not something you want to pursue? It's up to you. But you have to be, I feel like too many leaders, yes, their team to death. Yes, you can do that. Yes, you can do it that way. Yes, you can do it that way. And all the while, they're feeling super uncomfortable about what they're hearing and seeing. Open your mouth. Tell them, I'm uncomfortable with this. I don't want to do it this way.
Absolutely.
How about I like your idea, but how about we add this, and this to it to make me comfortable? Go back to the drawing board, come back to me with that. It's just the way it is. So I really enjoyed this conversation. You bring some great insights about happiness without all the cliches. I really like that. So why don't you let the listeners know if they want to reach out to you and get in touch, so maybe they can work on happiness in the workplace for their own company, how they can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, if any of the listeners have any questions or want to reach out based on our conversation today, you can email me at info, that's INFO, at leadershipmasteryalliance.com. And leadershipmasteryalliance.com is our main website. So if you're curious about the work that we do, you're more than welcome to, to check that out. And also connect with me on LinkedIn. You can just search for my name, Sharissa Sebastian, and it will pop right up. And I would love to connect with you that way as well. So thank you for listening.
All
and
right.
thank you for having me, Mike. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for being here. I know it's not always easy, especially on a Friday afternoon, or Friday morning, actually, to be here. So I really do appreciate the time that you spent. And to all the listeners out there, thanks for being here. Hope you've learned something from this episode that you can take and put into action in your workplace, because it doesn't do you any good to sit here every week and watch brilliant mind after brilliant mind after brilliant mind come through here and spew a bunch of information to you and then move on to the next one and do nothing with it. My advice to you is take it and put it into play. You're going to see change that takes your business and your career path to new heights. So new episodes of Gaining the Technology Leadership Edge every Wednesday at 8 a.m. Pacific on YouTube and LinkedIn. So hope to see you back next time.